Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Director Wray, as I'm sure you know, this week, the House has been considering the reauthorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, commonly known as FISA. I've been deeply troubled with the abuse of Section 702 of FISA in recent years, and so your testimony today is very well timed. Thank you. So, Director Wray, does the FBI currently comply in every way with the current Section 702 of FISA?
My understanding is that we're in compliance with the law.
Okay, so you think you do. All right, how do you respond to an unsealed document released by the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court on May 19th, 2023, which states your agency, the FBI, illegally misused this tool more than 278,000 times between 2020 and early 2021? And is this number of 278,000 abuses accurate?
So I appreciate the question. I'm glad to have the opportunity to clarify that. So first off, I would say that that opinion covers activity, querying activity that occurs all before all these reforms that we've put in place. So that's number one. Second,
When did you start putting those reforms in place?
Mid
after this?
2022, somewhere in that range.
2022 or 2023?
They started in 2022 and they kind of rolled into 23. They obviously don't
Okay,
just
all
flick
right.
a switch. But,
All right.
but the second thing I would say too is when you look at the FISA court, the same judges evaluating our compliance with 702 after all those reforms have put in place, you see consistently compliance rates well into the high 90% range. And the court actually commending the FBI for the improvements that they've seen because of the reform. So that's the second point.
Okay.
The third
so-
point I would make to you, third point, this is important because you asked, a third point that is important is that the querying that you're talking about in that opinion that again covers older activity, something like 99.7% of it would all have been prevented by the reforms that we've put in place.
Okay.
On top of that, the vast majority of those queries, the 278,000, are not actually 702 queries, much less non-compliant 702 queries.
Well, let me ask you this. This report ended in early 2021, and you started in mid-2022, so that would be an entire year. So during that time frame, how many times did the FBI abuse its FISA authority? Do you know?
I don't have any period of non-compliance that I can report here from that period, but I can
Okay.
tell you, tell you this.
Well,
The
all right,
court,
thank
court's
you for
opinion
answering
that
that
covers the
question.
more recent period.
As you know, the
Once
government
upon.
agencies typically need a warrant issued by a judge before they can access American citizens' phone calls, texts, internet searches, and emails. However, the government, in my opinion, has been able to query Section 702 acquired communications as an end run around the Fourth Amendment. My colleague, Andy Biggs, representative from Arizona, has an amendment to the current FISA reauthorization that would require the government to obtain a warrant or to obtain a FISA court order prior to conducting a U.S. citizen query of information already collected through the 702 FISA program. You know, you previously stated in a Senate hearing in December that it would be unworkable to require the government to get a warrant before collecting Americans' private communications. Yet former NSA lawyer George Croner recently estimated the warrant requirement would force the FBI to get about 3 warrants a day. Now, Director Wray, you've got more than 30,000 employees that work for the FBI. Are you seriously saying that 3 warrants a day is too much of a burden for the FBI to protect our Fourth Amendment rights?
That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, number one, no court has found that the Fourth Amendment requires us to use a warrant to look at information, to query information that's already in our 702 holdings lawfully, and the only courts to look at it have gone the other way. That's one. Number two, the problem with the warrant requirement goes beyond any kind of burden or delay that comes with it. The big part of the problem is that it's often only by running the query that we get to see the information that tells us whether or not we would meet a warrant requirement in the first place.
All right,
because
I've
these
got
are
one more
conducted
question
at the
for you
front
before my
end
time
of
runs
the
out.
investigation.
All right. We have, looking at the breakdown of the FBI's $11.3 billion budget, like last year, almost 60% of the budget is categorized as defense spending and only 40% as non-defense spending. And to me, that seems odd. I read your mission priorities and I did not see any reference to DOD. I mean, the FBI is not part of the Department of Defense, and they're a domestic law enforcement agency. So why is the FBI's budget categorized as 60% defense spending?
I believe the answer to your question, and I'm not an appropriations expert, but I believe the answer to your question is what's so-called NIP funding, which is overseen by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So a significant chunk of our budget is considered defense spending because of its part of the intelligence community budget, if you will. So it gets a little more complicated than that, but I think that's the high level.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, on page 16 of your budget request, you talk about civil rights. So the FBI has the primary responsibility to investigate all alleged violations of federal civil rights laws. And then you talk about color of law violations in there, which is any person using the authority given to them by a government agency to willfully deprive someone of a right. So you talk about the FISA Act and voter suppression, et cetera. Have you ever investigated a Second Amendment rights violation? I mean, you've got the Bruin decision, which struck down a New York law, which took away people's Second Amendment rights. And I've never seen anyone in government ever prosecuted for violating citizens' Second Amendment rights. Can you think of any time when the FBI has actually, used color of law to prosecute someone for violating someone's Second Amendment rights?
Well, not as I sit here, but obviously we're a 115-year-old organization with 38,000 employees and something like 300 offices all over the United States. So I'm no doubt that there could be any number of investigations that I wouldn't be aware of.
Okay, all right. Then you have a request in your budget for $284,000 for official reception fund. That is almost 6 times what the United States Attorney himself receives. I mean, his is $50,000, the ATF is $36,000, the DEA is $90,000, U.S. attorneys are $19,600, but the FBI is $284,000. Why? Why is the FBI literally 6 times what, Attorney General Merrick Garland's reception funds are?
I don't know that I could tell you, as I sit here right now, I know that we have a lot of engagement with foreign partners, and that could be a big driver, but I can't, as I sit here right now, give you the specifics, but I'm happy to have my staff follow back up with you.
I would appreciate that very much. And then lastly, the Department of Justice is asking for a 1.25% increase totaling $467 million, all right? But the FBI is asking for a 6% increase totaling $629 million. So the FBI is asking for literally a 350% increase in funding, more than the overall Department of Justice is. In fact, if the total spending for the DOJ is going up $467 million, and the FBI is asking for $629 million, then the DOJ actually has to take a cut somewhere in order for the FBI to get their increase in funding of at least $162 million. So what on earth, what justifies that kind of an increase for the FBI?
So what I would tell you is, and we certainly appreciate the department's support, including the Attorney General's support for our budget request. The effect of the fiscal year 2024 budget that was appropriated to us is the equivalent of about 1,000 per position cut. It's about a $500 million cut in our ability to get our job done. And so when you look across the range of threats that we are responsible for protecting Americans from, violent crime, 50 bad guys per day, every day, ransomware, 100 different ransomware variants that we're investigating, the Chinese, 1,300% increase in Chinese economic espionage, the Chinese hacking program, which outnumbers us by well over 50 to 1, fentanyl, we seized 270 million persons worth of fatal fentanyl in the last 2 years. And so the range of threats that the FBI is statutorily responsible for protecting Americans from is significant, and the impact of the 24 budget is such that most of what our budget request that you've talked about there calls for is to put us back on track so we can keep doing the hard work of keeping bad guys away from those people.
Okay, so what are the technical adjustments? $192 million for technical adjustments, and $286 million in adjustments to base. What is that?
I think the adjustments to base is sort of appropriation speak for the point that I was just making about getting us back on track in terms of the positions that essentially we would lose because of the impact on our cost of operations of the '24 budget.
And the technical adjustments?
That part, again, I'd have to go back and look at the
Okay.
specifics, but I can tell you that most of our budget is to get us back on track. We have a few enhancements, specifically on cyber, counterintelligence, and NICS. But that's essentially this year, that's essentially our budget.
All right, thank you. My time's expired. I yield back, Mr. Chair.